Hello, everyone. Welcome to the November 2023 DMI Advocacy Update Series. We're excited for another great conversation to learn more about the community and opportunities, how DMI's advocacy work, initiatives, and priorities, and get a deeper dive into the most pressing issues impacting our downtown. Today, for this November, we have Emily Mehl, Vice President with Broadwing Advisors, who's going to discuss commercial real estate, an important topic right now in any downtown, but particularly after the pandemic. Emily knows a tremendous amount about downtown, longtime employee at ULI, served for 13 years on our sister organization, Madison Central Business Improvement District Board, and is now with Broadwing Advisors. This is going to be an excellent discussion about what's happening with commercial real estate now in Madison and what the future looks like in the next couple of years. We're excited for this conversation here today. I'm Jason Elstrup, president of Downtown Madison Inc., and I'll be walking us through today's advocacy agenda. We want to thank our sponsors who make this event possible. We've got our great friends and major series sponsor, Scenair, and our supporting series sponsors, the Fiore Companies and Hush Blackwell. So thank you to our friends at Scenair and Fiore and Hush Blackwell. Now we're going to turn to our good friend and the Senior Vice President of Business Development for Scenair, Chris Gillings. Chris, how's it going today?
Jason, it's going well. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. What's on your mind? How's everything at Scenair?
Oh, what's on my mind is turkey, in addition to everything that we're doing around here, just like everybody else at this point in the holiday season. Like most, we're busy at the end of this year trying to stitch up what remaining business that we have, getting some funds raised so that we can continue our important work in affordable housing, not only in Wisconsin, but throughout our footprint in the upper Midwest and in the Mid-Atlantic. And it's certainly an interesting time, and I think our conversation here with Emily is a timely one. I know that from our chair, we've seen the affordable housing industry really transformed by the pandemic. Lots of new challenges for even established properties and established developers as we kind of are all adjusting to not only the remaining carryover effects of the pandemic, but really broadly what is kind of a realignment in the way that the economics are working, not only in the investment and lending side in the industry, but in the operating side. And I think certainly, like most categories, commercial real estate has been really heavily impacted by this as well. The pandemic has transformed the way that we use our spaces. DMI's work downtown and in trying to get folks back down into the downtown core through the Streetery program and a lot of the things that you've done to support that have been really instrumental in trying to drive vitality back into the city. But there's a lot of long-term impacts that we're all adjusting to. So that doesn't stop the need for the work that we do. And certainly I'm really excited to hear what Emily has to say as far as kind of the outlook for commercial real estate, because it's Madison is the seat of government. It is the seat of business in a lot of ways, and the seat of education for the city. And it's the interplay between all those land uses that really are going to kind of pave the way for what looks forward for us. So excited for the conversation, as always. Excited to be part of the series.
Well, Chris, thank you for being part of the conversation. It is an important conversation right now. What does the future of downtown look like? It's always an organic beast to downtown, but particularly over the last couple of years, and excited to dig into that commercial real estate sector and what that future holds with an expert in Emily Mehl. Before we get to Emily, we're going to do a quick update on what's happening here in the Downtown Madison Inc. advocacy world. We've got three main pots we're going to discuss today. The first is on development and what's happening in development in and around downtown. Second, on transportation, and third, on some events that DMI is hosting over the next couple of weeks that I think many of our members will be interested in. First, on the development side, we've got several larger projects that we're paying attention to and larger work that we're focusing on. First, we've mentioned it here before in our advocacy update, but Regent Street, the Regent Street area. As many of you know, Downtown Madison Inc. administers and helps run a group called the Regent Street Group. And so we've got a keen interest on what's happening in and around Regent Street. The city, through their comprehensive plan, is taking on amendments. The comprehensive plan is now 5 years old. It's a 10-year plan, and it's halfway through. And so the city, about several months ago, 3 months ago, started a process to add any potential amendments or changes to the comprehensive plan. DMI submitted 26 separate amendments for adding greater density in and around Regent Street, mainly on the northern side of Regent Street, but some on the southern side of Regent Street as well. We're proud to say that the City Council here, they're going to be reviewing the changes that the Plan Commission put forward for the comprehensive plan. And those changes include 2 special map notes that DMI worked very closely with the planning department staff and the planning commissioners and the alders on. And those special map notes really recommend adding more density, and specifically 2 more floors to a whole series of parcels in and around Regent Street. There's been a lot of work by the alders, a lot of work by the property owners and by DMI to get this accomplished. And we think these special map notes will really help add more density in an area that can take more density and is already seeing more density. This is where students want to live. This is where the Gen Zers who are moving to the city want to live. This is a great location for it. And I think the city is moving forward and thinks the same way. And so we're excited to have these special map notes allow for 2 more stories in some areas and a little bit more in others. That hopefully will be added density that developers can see and then be able to create projects that are viable and hopefully create more affordable housing and just housing in general. So that's a very positive note. We're hoping that that crosses the line here very soon. Next up is the Brayton lot, another subject we've talked about in the advocacy update. The Brayton lot is the lot bounded, it's this last surface parking lot in downtown, bounded by East Washington, East Main, Butler, and Hancock. It's always hard to remember all 4 of those streets. But we are watching what's happening with the Brayton lot very closely. I've been working with the city on recommendations for the RFP, the request for proposal, that'll be going out in Q1 for developers to redevelop that site once the bus rapid transit construction is complete. The Brayton lot is currently being used for bus rapid transit construction and therefore is eligible for some funding federally. So there are some requirements there, but working very closely with the city. A series of alders also made a recommendation to increase the density from the current neighborhood plan to have 10 stories on the entire block, not just the East Washington facing site. There used to be a step back to 4 stories on East Main. Now the alders are pushing it successfully so far to have 10 stories on the entire development. It'll be interesting to see what happens in the future with that development. A very, very key parcel in downtown normally, but extra key when you bring in Jeff 2 and Jeff 3 into the mix, which will be sold by the state government here in the next couple of years. It creates a real opportunity for some really great density, vibrancy, and new usages in and around the area. Also, the Lake Street ramp is in the news. The Lake Street ramp is going to be redone by the city. It's on Lake Street, well named. I'm glad I explained that for you, that it's located on Lake Street, but you never know. This is a multi-use project that'll include a new parking ramp. So they're going to take the parking ramp down starting early next year, construct a new parking ramp, and underneath that parking ramp will be a new intra-city bus station, which is the first intra-city bus station we've had since the facility on Bedford closed several years ago, actually, with a ULI project, a very beautiful ULI project that Emily was a part of several years ago. This new facility will be great for us. It's the first intra-city bus depot we've had in quite some time, and in a very good location. At the same time, there'll be the parking, of course, and there'll be an apartment tower with the developer Mortensen on top of the parking lot. That construction is going to start soon, and the bid actually came in well under budget from the construction company. So that was positive news for the city. We continue to monitor that project, not only what's happening with that project, but in particular what's happening on Hawthorne Court, which is the alleyway behind the Lake Street ramp. We want to make sure we have some art, some vibrancy, some light in that area that's well trafficked, but is not always the safest space. So we want to make sure we're creating an environment that's safe for everyone. So we're watching that, including monitoring the 1% for the Arts campaign, which is 1% for the arts is any public project by the city. 1% goes into art. And we're hoping that much of that money will go into Hawthorne Court, working directly with the folks in the city on that. Last on the development track item is a development tracker. We've updated our DMI development tracker. If you go to our website, not 4 W's. See, I should slow down. 3 W's, www.downtownmadison.org. Upper right-hand corner is our development tracker. We just made several improvements to the searchability of the tracker. And so you can search what's new, what's been posted in the last 30 days, what is of what usage, a whole lot better map. This is our #1 used page on our website besides our homepage. So we're excited to continue to make more improvements to our development tracker. So please do check out the new tracker on our website. Next up, we've got some transportation updates in the advocacy area. First is bus rapid transit construction. You all are familiar driving around in the city. It's happening everywhere. It's about to come into downtown starting either February or March. So Q1 of next year. Station construction will begin on both the Capitol Square in front of Chase Bank, roughly, and in front of Subway on East Main and on East Mifflin, respectively. We'll see construction happening there. We'll also see construction on the 200 and 300 blocks of State Street. So if this is an important issue to us, please do contact us and we can get you in connection with the folks at the city's Department of Transportation to make sure you're updated on the construction in these two areas. We are appreciative that the city moved construction after our busy season in the summer and after the holidays. Thank you to Alder Verveer, to Tom Lynch, to Mike Czechvala and the team in the mayor's office for doing that. It's a busy season for us. And we didn't want to have it conflict, of course, with things like the farmers market. So thank you very much to the city there. But if you need more information, please do let us know. Also, the north-south bus rapid transit route, which is different than the east-west, which is currently being built, is in the planning phase. In fact, the city wants to move for the federal funding. Up to 80% of that project's funding will hopefully, knock on wood, come from the federal government, and they're putting that application in either Q1 or Q2 of next year. This north-south line will be pivotal and will use the same infrastructure to downtown. So it'll allow for the downtown east-west route. They'll use the same stations. It allows for even more access in and out of downtown. So we're very excited about the north-south phase of the second phase of the bus rapid transit. There are public meetings happening now. If you're more interest, just go to madisonbrt.com to find more information out with specifics. All right, last up, a couple of items that we want to make sure you're attending. Next event on our calendar is November 30th. It's our second biggest event of the year. It's our State of the Downtown report. We're going to launch our 13th report, which is our 2023 version, full of facts and figures about live, work, and play downtown. I think we're going to get a bit of a preview from Emily because Broadwing Advisors is a proud partner of ours on the State of the Downtown and provides some of our data. So thank you for them as well. But please do join us on the 30th from 7:45 to 9 a.m. at the beautiful Edgewater Hotel, where we'll have a panel discussion about all things downtown with Bob Burney from ULI, Brenda Gonzalez from UW, Ellie Westman Chin from Destination Madison, and Heather Stouter from the city's planning division. Should be a very robust and strong conversation. Please do join us on the 30th. And one of our last events of the year will be in-person events of the year will be our New Faces, New Places on December 14th. It's our holiday party at the beautiful US Bank right in the ULI building. Gorgeous location. We're going to have some great things happening at the event. Children's Theater of Madison. We have a project with Madison Reading Group. It's just going to be fantastic. So please do join us from 4 to 6 on the 14th of December. Well, that's enough from me. I've spoken too much. You don't want to hear from me anymore. Let's hear from Emily Mehl, Vice President with Broadwing Advisors, about all things commercial real estate here in downtown. Hello, Emily. How are you?
I'm well, Jason. Thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Well, thank you. I don't think anyone's ever said the word honor before, but I certainly appreciate it. I want to dive deeply into what's happening with commercial real estate. It's sort of one of the bedrocks, right? Workers are one of the 4 bedrocks of a successful downtown, right? You need a lot of residents, a lot of workers, a lot of tourists, and a lot of people from the area coming into downtown for events. And obviously, COVID changed a tremendous amount. As we mentioned before, downtowns are always organic, but the one that's changing the most is commercial real estate. So it's great to have an expert here to be able to answer questions about what's happening. So let's just start off. And I know you've got a presentation. What's the current state of the commercial real estate sector in Madison and in downtown Madison in particular?
Yeah, well, I'm going to go through some slides, but I think, overall, DMI has done such a great job of advocating for downtown and for the community to really talk about the demographics of the people that use downtown, and obviously employers and tenants of buildings are a big part of that ecosystem. And so that leads to why a lot of this is important and relevant. But let me share my screen just quickly.
Well, thank you for those kind words while you're sharing your screen too. We appreciate it. And I got to say, Emily was a former member of our board of directors and has been a wonderful asset in downtown and still is so strong today. So Emily is one of the sharpest techs I know. And so it'd be great to hear what's happening with the downtown office market.
Yeah, and so I'll start off with just giving some orientation of when we talk about downtown from a larger macro Madison market standpoint, we're really looking at data in the central area. This, for the most part, the bulk of the square footage lines up with DMI's geographic kind of advocacy area as well. But just to give you kind of a perspective of the spaces that we're specifically talking about from our data sets. Also to put it in perspective, the central area, so the central market within Madison is just about 4.6 million square feet in size. And to put that in perspective, the Willis Tower, some of us know as the Sears Tower still, is just about 4.5 million square feet. Yes, yes. And so, you know, we're talking about an area that is, you know, critical to the economic engine of not just Madison, but for our region. But all things considered, it's a fairly small area. So starting super high level, this is kind of a track of the downtown office vacancy rate. This is through all sectors, so through Class A, Class B, and Class C office spaces in that central area. All of the slides that we're going to be looking at are starting in 2020, Q2, because that's really when everything changed and when we're really trying to figure out what the new future equilibrium is going to be in the commercial real estate market. Currently, we're sitting at about 16% vacancy. And we have been fairly consistent around that number, about 600,000 square feet of vacant space for the last, you know, year or so. But to really tell the story of what's happening in the market, we're going to drill in just a little bit deeper. This chart shows vacancy and availability numbers for both the Class A sect and for the Class B data sets. The difference between vacancy and availability: vacancy is what is currently sitting vacant, what space does not have a lease on it. Available space is space that the tenant that is currently in that space is either looking to actively sublease their space, or they know that they're underutilizing their space. And so it's space that we anticipate to come onto the market. And so generally, the difference between vacant and availability, when there's a significant amount of availability more than the vacancy amount, that's an indicator that you can anticipate more vacancy in the future. Back in 2020, downtown Madison had a situation where really there was less availability than vacancy, which means that tenants didn't have the opportunity to grow. We were at a 6% vacancy in the Class A market, which is actually less than what is healthy. Moving forward to today, you can see that the vacancy has increased significantly, but what we're really seeing is that flight to quality that you see in really any down market. And so the actual vacancy rate on Class A office space in downtown Madison has stayed fairly consistent since the pandemic. And where we're seeing an increase in vacancy and in availability is really in that Class B market set.
Emily, can I ask you a question about that
Yes.
idea of flight to quality? Because we're hearing that more and more. Is it true that flight to quality, I actually think it's two things, and I'm asking you if that's right or wrong. One is Class A, right? I mean, that's the flight to quality. It has the nicer amenities, the coffee shops, the nice flooring, the lighting, the everything, that you expect for Class A. But I also think, isn't it a flight to quality in quality location as well? And we're seeing, and maybe this is me as a homer to downtown, but we're seeing groups that want to be close to amenities that oftentimes like a downtown Madison can provide, because their employees want to be near the coffee shop, right? Want to be near the lunch locations or the theater for after. Is that also considered flight to quality?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so in a lot of this, you'll see, I mean, that is when you compare vacancy rates, especially in that Class A sector, from the downtown market to far west side, south side, east side, you're really seeing that story play out. You're seeing that companies may be downsizing their overall amount of square footage, but they're trying to curate spaces where people want to go, giving their employees a reason to want to work in person. And when you're talking about amenity-rich spaces, or you're talking about spaces that encourage people to come, downtown is an amenity. Whether it's meeting for lunch, whether it is, accessing events, concerts, ability to connect with others is definitely a huge part of that story. Digging into this a little deeper, you can kind of see where the growth in vacancy and availability is. I think another thing that I think is important to point out at this point is the Q2 data from this year. You're starting to see that the availability, what's available, is becoming closer to what is physically vacant. And that's actually a really good sign. That shows that space is being absorbed. And even if it's not vacant space is being absorbed, that means that some of the spaces that had been marketed for sublease are being occupied now. And so that's showing that there's activity happening. And so I think that that's a really good sign. And even in that Class B, where you're continuing to see more and more vacancy, the difference between vacant and availability is getting much smaller. I think another indicator that we track and look at is these large blocks of space. And so this is really a phenomenon that has happened since the pandemic, but there are citywide 51 large vacancy office blocks that are currently available within the market, with the average size of 54,000 square feet. In downtown, there's 10 large vacancy blocks. And so that would be either a very large office suite or a building that has consecutive floors that may be available. The average size of the downtown large vacancy blocks is just about 34,000 square feet. And that makes up 51% of the total vacancy in downtown. And so what you're seeing is a lot of activity on smaller tenant sizes. There's, you talk to landlords downtown, we talk to our clients, we talk to our colleagues in the industry, and there is more activity now than there's been, but it's really in that smaller office size. And so that's consistent with national trends. Large companies are downsizing. And trying to figure out what their future office needs are. And so they're taking much smaller offices. And so I think that this is something to keep our eye on, because once you take those large blocks off the market, downtown Madison is getting closer to a vacancy that is, consistent to what we were seeing pre-pandemic.
Emily, aren't we, one quick thing on that note, aren't we also seeing, we're obviously seeing some firms downsizing, right? They're going from, well, I'm just making up numbers, 20 to 15,000 or 20 to 10,000. But we're hearing from the brokers as well. We are seeing a lot of new firms come in that are not currently located downtown or don't have office space currently, that are looking for that smaller space, that sort of 2, 3, 4, 5,000 square feet, which are new entrants, which I think is also bodes well for downtown. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct. And so a big part of flight to quality is, in a down market, there is an entry point for companies who may not have been able to lease the amount of square footage that they would have needed in the past, or may not have been able to afford it. But in this market, there's companies that are able to come in and say, you know what, our staff is 75% remote. We need a landing pad. We want it to be located in a place where there's activity. We want it to be located in a place where when our employees do work in person, there's opportunities to connect, there's opportunities to, take advantage of all the amenities that downtown Madison has to offer. So we're definitely seeing that trend. And I think it'll continue as that space becomes available. Additionally, a lot of what we're seeing in downtown is the long-term tenant stakeholders, a lot of DMI partners, tenants that have been in downtown for a long time are reinvesting in their space right now. They're reinvesting by either renovating, they're right sizing to figure out how their firm is going to utilize its space and how its real estate is going to relate with its business goals in the future. And so we're not seeing tenants leaving the downtown. In fact, they're adding capital and investing in their spaces. Often though, some of these larger tenants are giving up a little bit of space. And so what that's doing is it's allowing other tenants who may not have in the past had the opportunity to have presence in downtown now do, which is pretty cool thing to see. If you go back to 2020, we had a situation like I pointed out kind of on that first slide where the vacancy was so low that not only did our large tenants not have the ability to expand and grow if their companies were growing, we saw some large tenants, their only opportunity to grow to meet their employment base was to leave the downtown. But we also had a situation where there wasn't enough room for companies that weren't traditionally located downtown to come downtown. And so as some of these long-term downtown stakeholders are giving back some space, it's allowing room for other groups to come in a different capacity.
Question before we get to, I'd love to hear the comparison to other downtowns. We haven't seen a lot of new commercial come to the market, right? I mean, I can really only think of one building, part of the Archipelago project, the WIDA Tower, which was, basically half already leased by WIDA. When do you think the market will get healthy enough to start to see some new construction potentially in office space?
Well, I mean, that's it's a loaded question, but I think it's twofold.
It
right?
is. That's a fair point. It is a loaded question.
Well, the answer is twofold. So when is there market demand is the first question, right? When does the market hit a vacancy rate where it can accept new construction? The second coin is when can a potential developer get the financing that they need to build a project? And I think that is, no fault of the Madison community, but banks are not lending on commercial projects in any large amount at this moment, due to all the things that we can talk about a little bit as we move on here, but a lot of landlords are holding financing and great rates that were secured prior to the pandemic, and as those rates turn over, everybody's trying to kind of hold their breath to see what happens with the lending market.
I do love that you just called me out for my question, though. That's how well Emily and I know each other. So thank you for that. All right, yeah. This next question I don't think is loaded. I don't think it is, but you've obviously painted the picture of what's happening in downtown Madison. How is downtown Madison's commercial office market comparing to other similar downtowns across the country? I think it's important for us to understand where we are in perspective to other downtowns.
Yeah, and so this chart
not a loaded question. Not
a loaded question at all.
Good.
This is pretty clear cut. Yeah, and so so office total downtown vacancy rate is sitting at 16%, and we're really on the low end for other similar commercial business districts throughout the country. You have some areas like Portland and Boulder and Columbus that are, sitting, you know, above 25% vacancy, inching towards 30% vacancy. We are really in a fairly healthy spot. A lot of that goes to the fact that we were so healthy prior to the pandemic. And I think a lot of that also goes to the fact that given the makeup of our city, you know, being adjacent to the state capitol, being adjacent to the University of Wisconsin, being bound by 2 lakes, we were, you know, at a density level that was not overbuilt prior to the pandemic. And so that serves us well and will continue to serve us well as we, you know, determine what the future looks like.
Why do you, I mean, you know, so the next slide, you know, why do you think that we're at this pretty healthy place?
I mean, I think a lot of it is because, you know, like I said, we weren't overbuilt. We were at a very healthy vacancy rate prior to the pandemic. We haven't had a lot of tenants leave the downtown. The business mix in downtown, whether it be law firms or government relations, we have a lot of business types that are hyper focused on downtown that have, you know, maintained their need for physical office space. And so I think that has been very helpful as we move forward. Mm-hmm. Okay.
So yeah, one of the next things that we want to look at here is, you know, this employment growth is quite important. You know, what's happening with this sort of graph here? This is, I think, an important statistic for folks to understand.
Yeah, and so I included this because this is a data point that is really we haven't seen in real estate markets traditionally, and that is generally when you have employment growth, you have growth of occupancy of office space. And so these numbers are related to the larger office market in Madison, but you see the growth of employment in Madison, and you compare that with over 300,000 square feet of negative absorption in the Madison market over the last 2 years. And so that is a upside down data point compared to what you would generally see in the office market. And so how this corrects itself, what this looks like for a new equilibrium as we move forward, I think it will be interesting to watch. But Madison's employment growth absolutely goes to, you know, some of the strength that we've seen in the downtown market. Companies are still growing. They're still investing in human capital. Madison is still a place that people want to be and live and work. And so there's a lot of upside to this, but it does show and kind of shines a light on some of those challenges that we're facing over the last couple of years. This is really not a data point that would have made sense prior to the pandemic.
You know, it's interesting. I mean, you're showing basically 2% employment growth year over year over year for multiple years running. I think that bodes very well for what's happening. So I've read, you know, significantly on this subject about, you know, commercial office, and we're starting to see some trends, right? Some common trends that are happening. I actually read an interesting article by Gallup, who's done over 300,000, you know, Gallup, the survey company, they did over 300,000 surveys. And they said we're starting to see some trends that are cemented, and we may have actually started to see some of those trends in 2022. What trends are you seeing sort of both locally and nationally in the commercial office space?
Yeah. So I've actually included some information that was pulled from Gallup.
I actually didn't. I didn't see that. I'm sorry. Well,
no, it's okay.
Nostradamus here. That was okay. Well, I didn't.
Well, I mean, we're on the same page, which I think is great. So
we are.
One of the things that Gallup has been put information out on is looking at employment engagement and what is, you know, the right amount of days for employees to be on site and working in person to maximize that engagement. And really fits within that 2 to 3 days with a peak at 3 days in the office. And so the national conversation over hybrid officing, hybrid's not going anywhere. This is, I think, the future of work, and how that translates to what spaces look like, how spaces are designed, how much square feet tenants need, how that space functions, where it's located, I think are questions that are being solved right now. But, overall, people and tenants are looking for that flight to quality. That quality can mean amenity-rich spaces. When you talk about amenities, that can be your surrounding environment. It could be downtown, it could be transportation leading to your office, how people get there, what people do when they get there. It can also mean how the space is designed and constructed, and what's involved, amenities that are located within those buildings as well. You see news reports and studies coming out of all sorts of types of relevant amenities that are being programmed into new commercial properties or being retrofitted into existing commercial properties. And it's everything from shared conference facilities that we've seen in the past, rooftop terraces, to pickleball courts, to golf simulators, to anything that can bring people together. Companies and landlords are really answering the question of what's going to encourage people to come to the office, what's going to encourage them to engage meaningfully, what's going to encourage them to interact with one another, but also what type of environment and experience do they want for their clients and their customers as well. How to bring people into those environments. The other thing that we're seeing kind of touches a little bit on the question that you asked about new development, which is a flight to capital. And so this is a little bit more of a less about how you use the space and more about how you create the space. How TIs are funded, how landlords incentivize tenants to their buildings with sharing of construction costs, how tenants and companies can fund and finance kind of all of the things that they want to design and build in order to encourage the connectivity in their office for their employees that they want, is something that is kind of a new conversation in commercial real estate at this moment. Everybody wants the spaces, but figuring out how to fund them, how to finance them, and really looking at capital from a perspective of partnering with your landlord in a way where resources might be more limited than they were a few years ago, and construction costs are higher and interest rates are higher. And so really thinking creatively about partnerships with landlords and thinking creatively about how to make these spaces a reality is definitely a large factor in decisions right now for companies looking to make a change.
Well, our lease is up in a year and a half here at DMI. Am I going to be demanding a pickleball court? I don't know. I'm going to take a hot take here. This is my first hot take of this podcast, but I'm not a big pickleball.
I don't know pickleball.
No, I'm a tennis player. I'm not a big pickleball person. There you go. Making news. Thank you very much for your excellent recap of what's happening in downtown Madison. It sounds like we're in a pretty good place compared to other markets. It sounds like we've got good fundamentals, particularly with employment growth. and good fundamentals when we're starting to see some trends, right? With the flight to quality in both location and amenities, and we're rich in both, and we never overbuilt. So overall, what would you say your perspective is on the commercial real estate market in downtown Madison in the near future, over the next couple of years?
Yeah, so I think, there's two things that are important moving forward. We talked about existing downtown stakeholders reinvesting and staying committed to downtown. And so it's continuing to advocate for the vibrancy of downtown, creating those partnerships with all sorts of organizations that are working hard to make sure that downtown is welcoming and active in a way that can continue to attract new businesses. As our committed tenants continue to stay, right size and rethink how their spaces are going to look, we need to just continue to attract businesses that can fill some of the spaces that they've left. And so I think that the work that DMI is doing and has been doing is integral to that. And I think the future is bright.
Well, I think we should end on that note then. I always like to end on the positive. Emily Mehl,
Yes.
Vice President with Broadwing Advisors, thank you so much for joining our November advocacy update. It was very insightful. We really appreciate all you've done in the last 15 years for downtown and all you're going to continue to do in the future. So thank you, Emily, very much.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And thank you to our sponsors of our advocacy update series, our major series sponsor, Sinair, and our supporting series sponsors, the Fiore Companies and Hush Blackwell. Hopefully we'll see you downtown sometime soon, especially this holiday season. This is an important time for so many of our small businesses. Hopefully you make many of your holiday purchases right down here at our locally owned businesses in downtown Madison. If not, we'll see you at a DMI event soon. Thank you all for your support of DMI and downtown Madison. We'll see you soon. Have a great day.